November 1939. The Admiralty calculated Britain possessed 77 cruisers to patrol thousands of miles of sea lanes enforcing the blockade against Germany. Naval doctrine required minimum 300 cruisers for adequate coverage. Building that deficiency through construction would consume 5 years and £60 million, resources Britain didn't possess. The solution arrived from commercial shipping companies. Requisition ocean liners, bolt on obsolete guns, send them to patrol. These armed merchant cruisers cost roughly £50,000 to convert, 1/4 the price of building a new cruiser. They were economically rational. They were militarily suicidal. HMS Rawalpindi proved both propositions simultaneously. On November 23, 1939, she encountered German battlecruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau between Iceland and the Faroe Islands. Captain Edward Kennedy had commanded a converted passenger liner mounting 8 6-inch guns dating from 1918. He faced two 32,000-ton battlecruisers carrying 9 11-inch guns each, protected by 14-inch armor on their turrets and 12-inch belts on their hulls. Rawalpindi displaced 16,697 tons. Her armor consisted of nothing. The engagement lasted 14 minutes. Rawalpindi burned fiercely, sank at 2000 hours, taking 238 men, including Captain Kennedy. She scored 1 hit on Scharnhorst, causing minor splinter damage. The strategic arithmetic justified the sacrifice completely. That single engagement, that 14-minute massacre, forced Germany to abort a major commerce raiding operation. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau retreated to Germany rather than risk encountering the British home fleet vectored toward Rawalpindi's position. The £50,000 armed merchant cruiser prevented millions of pounds in merchant shipping losses. Sometimes economics demands accepting certain destruction. The mathematics of total war proved crueler than any German battlecruiser. The armed merchant cruiser program began with brutal necessity. September 1939. Britain operated 77 cruisers versus 300 required for blockade enforcement and convoy protection. Each county-class cruiser cost £2 million and required 36 months to build. Destroyers demanded 18 months at £200,000 each. The Royal Navy couldn't build sufficient warships before Germany severed Britain's Atlantic lifeline. Ocean liners provided an alternative. Fast passenger vessels displacing 15,000 to 20,000 tons could maintain 17-knot cruising speeds, adequate for northern patrol duties, intercepting merchant ships. Their large hulls offered space for gun mountings, crew quarters, fuel bunkers. P&O, Cunard and White Star operated dozens of vessels suitable for conversion. Most critically, they existed already, sitting in ports requiring modification rather than construction. The conversion process proved deliberately minimalist. Remove passenger accommodations, install gun platforms on former promenade decks, mount 8 6-inch guns, typically Mackay 7 models dating from World War I, pulled from storage depots, add 2 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, strengthen decks minimally to handle recoil loads, fill tween deck spaces with empty oil barrels for marginal damage tolerance. Commission the vessel as His Majesty's ship, despite lacking armor, compartmentalization, or modern fire control systems. Cost per conversion, approximately £50,000 in 1939 currency, about £2.5 million modern equivalent. Construction time, 6 to 8 weeks at commercial shipyards. Compare to building a new Crown Colony-class cruiser, £2 million cost, 36 months construction time. The exchange rate approached 40 to 1 in favour of conversions. Britain commissioned 56 armed merchant cruisers between August 1939 and March 1940, spending roughly £2.8 million total. That figure represented 1.4% of destroyer cost for equivalent numbers. The Peninsular and Oriental Steam Navigation Company launched SS Rawalpindi at Harland and Wolff's Belfast Yard, March 26, 1925. She measured 548 feet long, 71 feet beam, displaced 16,697 gross registered tons. 4 quadruple expansion steam engines generated 15,000 indicated horsepower, driving her to 17 knot service speed. She carried 307 first-class and 288 second-class passengers on the London-Bombay route. Interior design by Elsie Mackay emphasized luxury, polished wood panels, Art Deco fixtures, spacious dining salons. She represented £750,000 of pre-depression maritime investment. August 26, 1939. The Admiralty requisitioned Rawalpindi. P&O received nominal compensation, effectively government seizure under emergency war powers. The vessel proceeded to Royal Albert Dock, London, where R&H Green and Silly Weir conducted conversion. Her after funnel was removed to reduce visibility. 8 6-inch Mach 7 guns were mounted, 4 per side in individual emplacements. 2 3-inch anti-aircraft guns were added behind the bridge. Magazines and shell rooms were installed below former passenger cabins. Fire control consisted of a rangefinder on the bridge and basic telephone circuits connecting gun positions. No armor whatsoever. The polished wood panels remained. They'd burn spectacularly when hit. Crew composition reflected the desperate improvisation. Captain Edward Kennedy was 60 years old, retired from active service since 1921 under the Geddes Act economy cuts. He'd been recalled specifically for armed merchant cruiser duty, experienced officers commanding expendable vessels. Most ratings were Royal Naval Reserve, merchant seamen possessing basic naval training. Many were original P&O crew who'd served aboard Rawalpindi as civilian personnel. They knew the ship intimately. They possessed no combat experience against capital ships. The mission parameters were explicit: patrol the Iceland-Faroe Gap, enforcing blockade against German merchant vessels attempting to reach home ports. Intercept and search suspect neutrals. Report German warship sightings immediately. Under no circumstances engage enemy capital ships. Retreat and transmit position. Armed merchant cruisers existed to provide coverage, not combat capability. Their guns were for intimidating unarmed merchantmen, not fighting battlecruisers. November the 21st, 1939. Admiral Wilhelm Marschall departed Wilhelmshaven, commanding Scharnhorst and Gneisenau plus screening destroyers. Mission: break into the North Atlantic, attack convoys, draw Royal Navy units away from other operations. The battlecruisers represented 64,000 tons of combined displacement, 18 11-inch guns, 32 knot speed. Each vessel cost approximately 180 million Reichsmarks, roughly £18 million total. They were Germany's newest, fastest capital ships. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau embodied modern naval architecture. 928-centimeter SKC-34 guns in 3 triple turrets could penetrate 12-inch armor at 20,000 yards. 12 15-centimeter secondary guns provided anti-destroyer defense. Armor belt reached 350 millimeter thickness, 14 inches of Krupp cemented steel. Turret faces carried 360 millimeter armor. Conning towers 350 millimeters. The ships could absorb punishment that would vaporize any cruiser. They achieved 31.5 knots during trials, faster than most British capital ships. Range exceeded 8,000 nautical miles at cruising speed. November the 23rd, 1939, approximately 1,500 hours, Rawalpindi patrolled her assigned sector southeast of Iceland. Intelligence suggested the pocket battleship Deutschland might attempt returning to Germany through the gap. Orders: sight and report, do not engage. Weather deteriorating, fog banks forming, visibility intermittent. Captain Kennedy maintained routine, 4-hour watches, constant vigilance, no expectation of contact with major units. 15:07 hours. Lookouts sighted a warship silhouette emerging from fog. Kennedy initially assumed a British cruiser. Newcastle or Edinburgh also patrolled the northern patrol. Battle stations sounded regardless. Binoculars revealed unfamiliar superstructure. The silhouette matched Deutschland's profile. 3 gun turrets, raked funnel, military bearing. Kennedy ordered FAM signal transmitted repeatedly, recognition code indicating friendly vessel. No response. The stranger closed at high speed. 1,530 hours. Positive identification. German capital ship, not Deutschland, as initially reported. Kennedy transmitted enemy sighting report. 1 battlecruiser sighted. Corrected moments later. Attacked by Deutschland. The initial misidentification persisted briefly. The Admiralty received both signals. Royal Navy units across the North Atlantic began vectoring toward the reported position. HMS Newcastle, patrolling nearby, adjusted course immediately. The home fleet at Scapa Flow prepared sortie. 1,540 hours. A second warship emerged from fog on Rawalpindi's starboard quarter. Scharnhorst ahead, Gneisenau astern, caught between 64,000 tons of German battlecruisers mounting 18 11-inch guns total. Kennedy faced the decision every armed merchant cruiser captain dreaded. Surrender, run, or fight. The tactical calculus demanded surrender. Rawalpindi's 8 6-inch guns could penetrate perhaps 3 inches of armor at maximum range, irrelevant against 14-inch turret faces. Her shells would bounce off harmlessly. Scharnhorst's 11-inch guns could penetrate Rawalpindi's unarmored hull at any range, from any angle. One hit would cause catastrophic damage. Kennedy possessed no armor, no compartmentalization, no damage control capability. His vessel was a floating target constructed from merchant-grade steel and polished wood paneling. The strategic arithmetic demanded retreat. Dense fog banks lay nearby. Rawalpindi could disappear, deny Germany targets, preserve the vessel and crew for future blockade duties. The Admiralty's orders explicitly prohibited engagement with capital ships. Kennedy's mission was sighting and reporting, accomplished. Every moment survival extended, increased probability of Royal Navy units arriving to intercept the Germans. Kennedy chose combat. His reasoning remains subject to historical debate. Some accounts suggest he refused to surrender his ship without resistance, maintaining Royal Navy honor regardless of tactical insanity. Others argue he believed drawing the battle out would allow Newcastle time to arrive, preventing Scharnhorst and Gneisenau from escaping before home fleet units intercepted them. The most pragmatic interpretation. Kennedy understood that surrendering might allow the Germans to sink Rawalpindi covertly, suppressing news of their presence until they'd escaped the North Atlantic. 1,603 hours, Scharnhorst signaled repeatedly, "Stop! Watch ship, do not use wireless." Rawalpindi responded by altering course toward fog banks and laying smoke floats. Kennedy was heard saying, "We'll fight them both, they'll sink us, and that will be that. Goodbye." Battle ensigns were hoisted. 16:03 hours. Scharnhorst opened fire at 7.5 kilometers. 9 11-inch shells screamed toward Rawalpindi at supersonic velocity. Rawalpindi returned fire immediately. 8 6-inch guns engaging at maximum rate. 3 minutes later, 16:06 hours, Scharnhorst's shells struck. The first salvo hit the boat deck directly beneath the bridge, killing everyone on the bridge, including Kennedy. The radio room disintegrated. Further transmissions became impossible. The 11-inch shells, each weighing 660 pounds, penetrated Rawalpindi's hull like paper. No armor existed to detonate fuses prematurely. Shells exploded deep inside the vessel, among crew quarters, machinery spaces, fuel bunkers. Fires erupted immediately. The polished wood panels burned ferociously. High-octane fuel fed the flames. Within minutes, Rawalpindi burned from bow to stern. Gneisenau joined the engagement 8 minutes after Scharnhorst, 11 hours. Additional 11-inch shells destroyed Rawalpindi's main gun control station, immobilized starboard guns. The vessel listed heavily, fires raging out of control, crew abandoned ship, those who could reach lifeboats. Most perished trapped below decks or incinerated at their posts. Rawalpindi managed one hit on Scharnhorst. A 6-inch shell struck the aft deck, causing splinter damage and minor casualties. The armor absorbed the impact. Scharnhorst's combat capability remained unaffected. That single hit represented the entirety of Rawalpindi's offensive achievement, proof that armed merchant cruisers could technically hit battlecruisers, and proof that hits meant nothing against proper warships. 14 hours, 14 minutes after opening fire, Rawalpindi was a flaming wreck, dead in the water, listing 45 degrees, burning uncontrollably. Survivors clung to wreckage in frigid Atlantic waters. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau closed to rescue survivors. 27 men were pulled from the sea by German crews. At 2000 hours, Rawalpindi capsized and sank. Final count, 238 dead, including Captain Kennedy. 48 survivors total, 27 rescued by Germans, 11 picked up later by HMS Chitral, another armed merchant cruiser, plus the 2 recovered by Newcastle. Admiral Marshall faced immediate tactical crisis. Rawalpindi's initial sighting report had reached the Admiralty 4 hours earlier. By 2000 hours, substantial Royal Navy forces were converging on his position. HMS Newcastle appeared briefly through fog, sighting Gneisenau before weather closed in again. Marshall knew the home fleet was steaming north from Scapa Flow, battleships Nelson and Rodney, heavy cruiser Devonshire, multiple destroyer flotillas. If he continued south into the Atlantic, he'd run directly into forces capable of destroying his battlecruisers. The strategic calculation proved straightforward. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau cost £36 million combined. They represented Germany's primary surface striking force. Losing them in an Atlantic engagement would cripple Kriegsmarine operations for years. The mission, commerce raiding, became impossible once Royal Navy knew their position. Continuing meant risking Germany's most valuable warships for minimal operational gain. Marshall ordered immediate withdrawal. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau turned east at maximum speed, running for German waters through fog banks that shielded them from British pursuers. By November 24th, they'd escaped the home fleet's cordon. By November 27th, they reached Wilhelmshaven safely. Mission aborted. 0 merchant ships sunk. Complete operational failure. The strategic outcome validated every calculation that made armed merchant cruisers economically rational. Rawalpindi cost £50,000 to convert and operated for 3 months before destruction. In exchange, she forced Germany to abort a commerce raiding operation that could have destroyed millions of pounds in merchant shipping. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau returned to port having accomplished nothing. The mere threat of Royal Navy interception, triggered by Rawalpindi's sighting reports, proved sufficient deterrent. The Admiralty's accounting justified the program completely. Britain commissioned 56 armed merchant cruisers in 1939 to 1940 at £2.8 million total cost. 15 were lost to enemy action between 1939 and 1941, roughly £750,000 in conversion costs plus the requisitioned vessels' peacetime values. In exchange, armed merchant cruisers maintained patrol coverage, preventing German merchant vessels from reaching home ports, intercepted blockade runners, and provided early warning of German naval movements that allowed proper warships to respond. Compare to hypothetical cruiser-based solution. Building 56 county-class cruisers would cost £112 million and require 15 years of continuous construction, monopolising Britain's largest naval yards. Those yards built aircraft carriers, battleships, destroyers, vessels that couldn't be replaced by converted liners. Armed merchant cruisers filled patrol duties that freed actual cruisers for combat operations requiring armor and firepower. The human cost remained appalling. Beyond Rawalpindi's 238 dead, other armed merchant cruisers suffered similar fates. HMS Jarvis Bay fought pocket battleship Admiral Scheer in November 1940, buying time for her convoy to scatter. Sunk with 190 killed, HMS Patroclus torpedoed by U-99 November 1940. 7 torpedoes required to sink her due to empty barrel flotation, 300 killed. HMS Salopian, Forfar, Voltaire, Alcantara all destroyed engaging enemies they couldn't defeat. Total armed merchant cruiser losses exceeded 2,000 men. Yet the strategic mathematics remained inexorable. Each armed merchant cruiser that died fighting bought time for convoys to escape, for home fleet units to arrive, for U-boats to be forced underwater. Rawalpindi's 14-minute stand prevented a commerce raiding campaign that might have sunk 50 merchant ships. Jarvis Bay's sacrifice saved 32 of 37 convoy vessels. The exchange rate favored Britain because Britain couldn't afford any other solution. The program's ultimate vindication came through its cancellation. By late 1941, Britain possessed sufficient escort destroyers and corvettes that armed merchant cruisers became redundant for convoy duty. Their vulnerability to U-boats, Patroclus required 7 torpedoes, but she still sank, made them liabilities. The Admiralty converted survivors to troopships, a role their large hulls suited perfectly. Armed merchant cruisers vanished from frontline service, having served their purpose, providing patrol coverage during the period when Britain possessed no alternative. Captain Kennedy received posthumous mention in dispatches, the highest honor available for actions where no witnesses survived to confirm Victoria Cross-worthy conduct. Scharnhorst crew members received High Seas Fleet badges for participating in the engagement. The British press lionized Rawalpindi's sacrifice, fighting against hopeless odds. Headlines celebrated Kennedy's decision to engage. The strategic reality proved more nuanced. Kennedy's sacrifice mattered not because Rawalpindi damaged Scharnhorst, but because the engagement itself triggered the operational response that forced Germany to abort the entire mission. The lesson applies broadly to total war economics. Adequate capabilities available immediately beat perfect capabilities, arriving too late. Britain needed 300 cruisers. Building them required 15 years. Converting liners required 8 weeks. The converted liners couldn't defeat battlecruisers, but they could sight them, report them, force Germany to account for the possibility that HMS Newcastle or battleships Nelson and Rodney might arrive within hours. That strategic presence, that operational uncertainty, achieved deterrence sufficient to neutralize German capital ships without engaging them. Rawalpindi was militarily absurd. An ocean liner with guns facing battle cruisers with armor. The engagement proved what everyone already knew. Unarmed conversions cannot fight purpose-built warships. But Rawalpindi was economically essential, a £50,000 solution providing patrol coverage for £2 million cruisers during the period when Britain possessed too few proper warships to maintain blockade. Sometimes survival demands accepting certain destruction. Rawalpindi's crew understood they couldn't defeat Scharnhorst. They fought anyway because strategic necessity demanded that German capital ships never operate with impunity. Every armed merchant cruiser that died fighting sent the same message. Britain's sea lanes were defended inadequately but persistently by vessels that would engage regardless of odds. That message, that operational uncertainty, deterred German commerce raiding more effectively than armor ever could. The final accounting, Rawalpindi burned for 6 hours before sinking. She killed 238 men, accomplishing nothing tactically. Strategically, she saved dozens of merchant vessels and thousands of tons of cargo by forcing Germany to abort operations. The £50,000 converted liner validated Britain's brutal economic logic. Build ships that can't win fights, but force the enemy to fight them anyway, because fighting reveals position and triggers responses they cannot afford. Wars aren't won by perfect weapons. They're won by adequate weapons deployed in sufficient numbers that the enemy cannot ignore them. HMS Rawalpindi was adequate, barely, for forcing Germany to acknowledge her presence. That acknowledgement, that 14 minutes of futile combat accomplished more than armor or firepower ever could. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the one that destroys the enemy. Sometimes it's simply the one that exists when needed, where needed, forcing the enemy to account for its presence. That's worth substantially more than any battlecruiser ever built.